Focus is brought to you by Envision Financial, where achieving your goals starts with the right advice and financial tools to help you thrive. Welcome back to another episode of Women in Focus. We are back in the studio, and our woman in focus today is a very interesting young woman. The first time I heard about her was when they were doing a chat about how the media does not take care of the women, the issues of women, and how they are mean to women or rude to women. And when I had a chat with her, I thought to myself, this is the woman that we should interview in Women in Focus, because this is the changing face of our community, young, brave women who are going to take the next level of broadcasting thought-provoking actions. Our Woman in Focus today is Rumneek Johal. Rumneek, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's honestly surreal because never would I have thought that I would be sitting here being interviewed by you, but thank you so much. I'm doing well.
Well, you know, it makes me feel very proud that a profession that I'm so fond of, and I'm indebted to it, that it has given me the stature that it has, my livelihood, and that you people are taking it forward, and in a very nice way, I must say. So why and how did you get interested in journalism?
It's a long story.
Very nice. I like long stories.
No, I think I've always had a passion for writing, for journalism, and my parents will tell you themselves that I never stopped talking as a child. So I think that for any journalist is usually where things start off.
Yes.
But when I was young, I loved reading. So my passion for reading, I always had my head in a book, and then that evolved into writing, and it was narrative storytelling at first. And so I would love writing any type of stories I could, make up the wildest stories. My elementary school teachers can attest to that. And then we had a speech contest in elementary school was when it started for me, because I had never done any type of public speaking, but I realized that was something that I really enjoyed. And so I did a speech on how not to do a speech. And so I went on stage and I rambled and I talked too fast and I did all these theatrics, and I came first place in the speech contest at elementary school. And I was like, hey, I think I can do this. And so it evolved, and in high school I realized it was something I wanted to pursue.
Right.
So I was doing my undergraduate degree at SFU, and I started writing for their newspaper. But I had no idea what being in journalism meant or how one would do that, because nobody in my life was a journalist. Nobody I knew personally was a journalist.
That's right.
So I remember I reached out to Sonia Sunger, who works for Global.
Yes.
She was on the cover of Darpin magazine, I believe, at the time, and I'd expressed this interest to my dad in like high school, and he cut out the article of Sonia Sunger and brought it to me and said,
Talk to her.
And I was like, I don't think it's that easy, Dad. You can't just call up Sonia Sunger and tell her you want to be a journalist. But I emailed her and I asked her, like, what do I do to end up where you are?
Right.
And she was like, you just have to start. You have to start somewhere. And I took it and I ran with it. So I did writing for SFU's newspaper, podcast, radio, and then I went and got my master's in journalism.
Beautiful. I mean, you know, to be able to know what you really want to do, and then someone to push you towards that, it's amazing. You talked about mom and dad. So let's take you to your childhood. So you were born here?
Yes, in Surrey, born and raised in Surrey, yeah.
Yeah. And mom and dad, how were they with you? You know, I mean, I hear stories about mom and dad being very strict, or, you know, not letting you do what you want to do. That doesn't seem like your mom and dad were like that.
No, but I think I did have to fight tooth and nail at first.
Really?
Because I'm the younger sibling.
Okay.
And like I said, I talked a lot. I had a lot of thoughts. I've always been very opinionated young lady. And my parents can tell you that themselves as well. But, you know, obviously our parents are a product of how they grew up. And so boys and girls at first were treated differently in our household. But then I told my parents, everything that my older brother can do, I should be able to do. I feel like that's just naturally how things are going to go, according to me. And honestly, with a little push and shove, they really did come around, and now they do give me the freedom to do whatever I want. But when it comes to career, there was never any of that. I'm very lucky that And I think like for any parent, you know, you have this opportunity when your kid tells you their crazy idea, you know, you have the opportunity to either encourage them or to crush those crazy ideas
Right.
when they're a kid. And so I'm really grateful that my parents, instead of being like, that's not realistic, or we don't know how you would become a journalist, or we don't know anybody who does that, they kind of entertained my crazy idea to help it become a reality. And so instead of telling me I have to be a doctor like the rest of my cousins, because I have very many cousins in healthcare,
They are.
a lot, and I was like, I can't become a doctor, you guys, like, it's just not going to happen for me. But no, my parents are really supportive from a young age, and I think, yeah, that little allowing me to, they gave me an inch and I would always take a mile, but
Yeah, of course.
that's kind of what I extended in my life, and I feel like it's gotten me as far as it did.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
You know, an inch is only this much.
Yes.
You have to take as much as you can.
Exactly.
And, you know, that expands your horizons as well, doesn't
Exactly.
it? And to have parents who are so encouraging and they must be very proud of you to see where you are today. I mean, you're running 5X Festival and writing for 5X. We want to talk about that, but let's take a short commercial break, get the program paid for, and then we'll come back.
Awesome.
Rumneek Johal is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Rumneek Johal. Now, Rumneek, what a lovely name. Who named you?
My parents, my dad did actually.
Dad. Okay,
yes.
so usually it's either mom or dad.
Yes.
So it's dad.
But my mom told me a story recently of how when she was like a teenager, she met somebody whose daughter was named Rumneek, and she was like, I really want to name my daughter that. And then my dad named me Rumneek, and I was like, it was written before I was even born.
There you go. Isn't that just amazing, you
Yeah.
know? And meanings, the name meaning is very important as well, right? So with your 5X festival, and let's go to 5X. How did that come in being?
Yeah, so I've only been a part of 5X for the last 2 years.
Okay.
But 5X Festival, now as it's known, was previously known as VIBC.
That's
so
right.
Vancouver International Bhangra Celebration used to put on lots of Bhangra shows and events in Vancouver. And then it evolved into 5X Festival, which is what is known now. We put on yearly music festivals in the Lower Mainland. This year we did it in Vancouver. It was virtual. It was honestly, for me, it was a joy. It was a joy to see so many first-time performers in our community get their chance to perform in front of a live audience for the first time and hear people chanting their name and singing along and feeling like rock stars. And it just shows me how much talent there is in our community, young talent that's just waiting for the opportunity, which 5X is trying to give.
So 5X has showcased lots and lots of big names as well. Right? I mean, Jazzy has been synonymous with 5X, right? Name some other names that you guys have featured.
Yeah, so this past year we had Intense Music, who's had an intense year
Yes.
doing music with Diljit. We had The Prophecy, we had Fateh DOE, we've had Jasmine Sandless in years past. So we've had a lot of really big names, and we're hoping to continue to have even bigger names and showcase widespread talent, but also local talent from right here in Surrey and the Lower Mainland.
Well, if you look at it, BC has given some really amazing names to the music industry, especially the Punjabi music industry. Jazzy B comes to your mind, the Varis brothers, Varis, that comes to your mind. I know that when we first started doing television, I would get all these guys to come into the studio, the Cooner brothers and you know, Kohinoor. And I know that Varis has become a big name in India as well. 40,000 to 60,000 people are there in a concert,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
It's incredible to see.
So local talent is something that you are very particular about. Majority of your concerts are in Surrey?
Yeah, so in previous years we did it in Surrey outdoors. This year, because of COVID, we had to do a little bit of a smaller festival, so we did it indoors in Vancouver. So that took place in September. It was a 3-day sold out festival, which was really exciting. We got to put it on in a pandemic safely, which was wonderful.
So did you have people there while you were filming?
Yeah, it was
Wow.
in person, so we just had everyone wearing masks indoors, and it was great.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, concerts cannot be done virtually. I think people have to be there because artists do get all the excitement from people screaming their name and all that, isn't it?
Exactly.
What are the plans for 5X in the next little while?
So I'm the editor-in-chief of 5 Express, which is our blog, and so we're doing a little bit of a relaunch in November, which is really exciting. Just kind of new branding, new everything for the magazine, and just trying to really be that essential South Asian Canadian magazine for youth in the diaspora. There's really, I think, for us, and the thing that I'm most passionate about, having worked in mainstream media, is that I have so much passion about this community, and so I know young people in this community want to hear our stories being told, or stories that we relate to, but there isn't very many spaces for us to do that on our own terms, for us and by us. And so I really want 5 Express to be that platform where we can explore our own relationship to our identity on our own terms, you know, and figure it out for ourselves, really, alongside one another.
When you talk about our own community over here, and we've been here now for over 120 years, right? So how many? 5 generations at least? So looking at those 4 generations prior to your generation right now, what are some of the issues that keep recurring?
I mean, I think that for myself, I think that the order of the day has not really changed much throughout the years. And by that, I mean, I'm very new in this industry. I can honestly say that. But I do think that I'm up against the same problems that I think people like yourself were up against, having to carve out your own path because there was no other option, and having to create platforms or spaces for us and that are welcoming for us, because we aren't necessarily going to be welcomed in every space. And I experienced that in mainstream media. I felt the stories I wanted to tell pertain to our community, but when I looked at a majority of ethnic media, I also felt I wouldn't be taken seriously and too young. You know, there's all of these things that I feel like people would have a preconceived notion about, despite the fact that I have an educational background in this. And so I think, yeah, this line of authority hasn't changed, and I think it's about time that it does.
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you brought up, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. Shall we take a short break?
Sure.
Rumneek Johal is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. This is something very interesting that you must all listen to and participate. So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Women in Focus is brought to you by Envision Financial, where achieving your goals starts with the right advice and financial tools to help you thrive. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Rumneek Johal is our Woman in Focus today. And we're going to be talking about some heavy-duty topics and issues that the entire community, especially the women in the community, are feeling. But we are probably not talking about it. I mean, I remember, and you mentioned that, in my good old days, when I was your age, and I was starting in broadcasting in BBC, or when I came here, it was always the guys that would put me down. And you just have to either cringe and say, okay, I'm going to say something, but maybe I shouldn't, or whatever. And you would either say it and just get out of it, or never participate in any of the issues. I mean, I remember not participating in parties, not going, because being a single parent, I was a divorcee, that was a no-no in those days, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the issues that women live with. Mm-hmm. And young women don't have the support of the family, probably, to be able to voice that. Mm-hmm. How did you come to know about that and talk about it, because you did a YouTube chat about it, right?
Yes, yes. So we talked about the male dominance of Desi media a couple of years ago, but before I talk about that, I think the biggest thing is, like I said, in my household, my family was very supportive and welcoming, and I didn't have to really, I wasn't up against a lot of these unequal ideals about boys can do this and girls can do this. But then when I entered the rest of the world and saw how everything else was functioning, especially in our community, I was shocked to see that the same patterns were reoccurring. So we talked about the male dominance of Desi media. This started after a sexist line of questioning was asked to an MLA at the time. And it really just forced us to think about the ways that women are, for the most part, excluded from a lot of these conversations. And when we are, our credentials aren't taken as seriously, which was the case with this female MLA. And then on top of that, you know, like I said, it's like when you're at, I wrote about this because I was like, it's when you're at a family function and it's like everyone's having a serious conversation and you try to join with like the uncles.
Yes.
And they're like, you don't know what you're talking about.
That's right.
But it's like, I wouldn't think that I would have to face that in my professional career.
Right.
But these structures of power continue in our newsrooms or in our media places or in politics and everywhere else, where as young women, we are told that we don't know what we're talking about, we're not qualified to be in these rooms, despite the fact that we're sometimes more qualified than some of the people that are in those rooms in the first place. But that's a conversation for a different day. Yeah, so I think that was really for me where it started, is I think I was just tired of the same patterns of seeing males dominating all of these conversations and who gets a seat at the table. Because I'm like, we can just make our own table at this point.
That's right. Not only the South Asian community, because we've had this issue going on for many years, for generations, where women have been excluded, even to the point where when you go for a marriage ceremony, it's not a woman who's performing the marriage ceremony, it's a man. And in the Hindu religion as well, there are no panditines, they're pandits doing everything. So I think that goes back to generations, okay? And one can talk about the invasion of India by the Greeks, the Mughals, and then the British, and solidifying that backwardness for a woman, not to be able to come up front. Having said that, there are women in the community who have broken the ceiling, you know, and they are doing a lot of work. And do you see that battle is difficult going up, or is it becoming a little easier?
I think because of the strides of people like yourself or other women in the community, I think it definitely, our fights are a little bit different, but I do think that it's still a lot of the same patterns. You know, I feel like I see the things that people like yourself or other women in this industry had to go through to get to where they are. And I think about the journeys of some men that have gotten to the same stature, and I feel like it's not the same journey. You had so many more battles and you had so much more adversity that you had to face. And I think to some degree that does still continue, where you know, women are often, we talked about this in that conversation, relegated to more like women's conversations or less serious conversations in the media. You know, we're not supposed to talk about the politics. It's like the men will be hosting those shows,
right.
and we're very much kind of told to stick to what we know, so to speak. So I think it's changing, but it's not changing to the degree that I think a lot of us would like to see.
Snail's pace.
Yes, exactly.
So, say for example, we could have a magic wand and change it. How would you see it?
I think there's a lot of conversations that still happen on the margins, you know,
Right.
and conversations about social justice, gender, you know, sexuality, these kinds of things are often, again, on the margins of a lot of our community spaces, and
Right.
and the people who are trying to push for change, you know, we hear like they're chalak, or they're, you know, trying to, you know, that woman is very, you know, smart-minded, and people say it like it's a bad thing,
It's a
and I'm
bad
like,
thing, yeah,
I
exactly.
think it's a great thing.
know.
If you call me jalak, I take it as a compliment, to be quite honest with you, because that's what I want to do. I want to chip away at the status quo. So I think that these conversations that are happening in the margins need to be welcomed into these spaces, and these spaces that are male-dominated or may have males at the top, welcome in young people and young women and young non-binary folks that want to have important conversations and do what you're doing, or just help you do what you're doing.
Don't you think that the control of media in our community is in the hands of people who are business people and are not broadcasters, are not journalists, so they don't understand that. So the only thing in their mind is money, right? The bottom line. So when you have that as your main aim, you're not going to be able to address issues that concern the community, let alone the women.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's precisely it, and that's why it's kind of stayed the same way for as many years, because it's very difficult for anybody else to get their foot in the door at any other way, you know?
You know what? Whereas it makes me a little sad that it hasn't changed so much. You know, in the last, I'm 75 years old now, in the last 50 years, I do have huge hope that it will, because you guys are very young and you're going to be able to fight and don't lose hope and continue fighting. And I think you will be there one day.
I'm gonna get there, kicking and screaming. I don't know how, but I'm gonna get there somehow. Let me tell you.
Oh boy, Rumneek, thank you so much for being a woman in focus today. We could talk about this till the cows come home.
Yeah.
You know, but I think we should do another interview about this, and maybe have a lot of other young women join in and raise their voice and talk about this, not just for the South Asian community. Look at the mainstream media, they also have the same issue.
Exactly.
Don't they?
Absolutely, they do, and I think that's part of why I felt like I didn't have a space in the mainstream media, and I wanted to come to telling stories for my community, but I think that there's things that need to change first.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Rumneek Johal has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Women in Focus is brought to you by Envision Financial, where achieving your goals starts with the right advice and financial tools to help you thrive.